Hello, my name is Crystal Petry, and you are watching season 3 of the Crystal Petry Podcast. On today's podcast, we have a familiar face and a familiar voice in Elena Hatzakos. She was here last week, and she is making another appearance this week to tell us about her part-time, Elena,
Yes.
full-time as a therapist.
Yes.
Okay.
Part-time. Thank you for having me on. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I could be on it twice. This is so wonderful.
Yes. You have just been amazing and you made
Thank
such
you.
an impression on me even before the last podcast. And if you haven't watched that last podcast, make sure you go back and watch Elena's very first podcast. So Elena, where in the world are you?
I'm in Long Island, New York, initially from Russia, but currently in Long Island, New York.
Excellent. Okay, so I think you are the first person of Russian descent that I have ever spoken to, or at least the first person that has said that has told me, that they're from Russia. So, wow, that's
Yeah, my
awesome.
ancestry is boring. I'm like purebred. So yeah.
It's exciting for me. I love it. I love it, Elena. Okay, so you are a therapist. Kind of tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a therapist.
Of course. I mean, I've been in the field for, gosh, I don't want to age myself, for quite a bit. I initially started in pre-med. I went into medical school for 2 years and then realized it wasn't for me. And it was always a decision of, do I want to go into psychotherapy or do I want to go into medical? Because I have a lot of medical trauma. I had a congenital heart defect, so I grew up in the whole hospital setting.
Wow.
So to me, it was something familiar, and I wanted to kind of give back either medically or therapeutically. But what really interested me was that with the medical field, it's like, okay, you have a headache, you take this is what's going to work. With psychology, it's like you almost have to, I hate saying it, it's like you're working with a guinea pig in a sense, because you don't know what's going to work, and you don't know what type of technique of therapy is going to work. You don't know what kind of medications are going to work. And that's why I put so much time into studying psychopharmacology too, and putting the two together. So in my field, I did private practice stuff. I did director of care coordination, where I'm a high believer of coordinating care for one person and working with other people in the field, whether they're in the medical field, whether they're in other fields in psychology, to create a treatment team for the individual. And I've also been a clinical director for some years as well. So running a clinical-based company. So been wearing a lot of different hats and seeing what kind of worked for me. And it's been a lot. And at times, balancing 2 jobs at the same time. So it's been quite a bit of work in the field.
So, as a therapist, I know you specialize, at least now, you specialize in helping people deal with depression and loneliness. Why did you focus, or why are you focusing on those two aspects currently in your career as a therapist?
So I have multiple specialties, but with depression and loneliness, I always feel like I want to help people find their purpose in life. I want them to I'm a trauma-informed therapist, so I don't want their traumas to continuously hold them back from what their purpose in life is, and to really see these success stories happen. And with depression and loneliness, they really go hand in hand. To me, it's easy to work with that population. I worked with children in that field. I worked with geriatric. I worked with adults. Mainly right now, I focus on adult care. So
I have a couple follow-up questions on that. Okay, when you say you are a trauma-informed therapist, what does that mean?
I had a very extensive training in trauma care. So people who have complex traumas, people with any trauma background, medical trauma. And I know there's a lot of people that go into my field because they have their own traumas and they feel that they need the validation by helping other people with the trauma care. And unfortunately, countertransference could happen, and trauma bonding can happen. And to me, it's important to be trauma informed in the right way so that I could kind of cut off my own medical trauma and kind of be present for the individual in 100%. And that is what trauma informed care is just really being familiar with the different types of traumas and the complexities that come with it.
Okay. My second question for you, Elena, you deal with children. Okay. You deal with children that are dealing with depression and loneliness?
Mm-hmm. I've had that. When I was working for a private practice, I did a lot of play therapy and other forms of techniques to work with children and teens that experience depression and loneliness. I mean, we are in a, especially post-COVID, I mean, play dates happen virtually. You don't
Yeah.
have a lot of face-to-face interactions. A lot of parents hold back from having play dates. You see a lot of that happening. And loneliness really does impact depression in a horrendous way. So, and depression could lead to other comorbidities as well.
What is the youngest patient that you've seen?
I've had a 5-year-old in my care.
Elena, you had a 5-year-old?
Yes. And they came in with a list of things they thought was wrong with the child. And I would say that child, after a year of in therapy, she went from being in special ed classes and spitting on her principal and having a lot of outbursts in school and at home to being in a specialized program for gifted children. And really like embracing her family dynamics and just really being emotionally intelligent at 6 years old. So to see that is very important. And, working with children is there's a lot of experiences that you have.
Right. And I don't guess. I know that children deal with a lot of stuff. And a lot of
Oh,
times
yes.
they suffer in silence, which is horrible, because you grow up still suffering in silence into your teenage and adult years. You have those things that you've never like spoken about or talked about or gotten help about. But I am just outdone that number one, you have children that are dealing with depression and loneliness, and number two, that you had a 5-year-old. So
Yeah.
the list that the parents brought you, did they have depression and loneliness on that list, or was that something you discovered during your time with the child?
That's something that I discovered. They were more concerned that, they have ADHD, they're oppositional, and they're defiant. And a lot of times that happens because there's other underlying things that are going on. And so you have to build that patient-therapist relationship and put the time and effort to do so in order to really crack the reasoning behind what's going on and why are you being defiant and why would you spit at your principal's face. Like, what's going on in your mind when you're doing things like that? So, a lot of techniques go into that to really break that barrier and allow that, say, 5-year-old to open up to you and start being open to changing and seeing that there's different techniques that they could implement in their life to not feel depressed and to feel lonely and not to take it out in a defiant manner.
You know, Elena, this is something that I say all the time, and I've spoken about this with other podcast guests. When you have children that are like maybe elementary, maybe even middle school, that are acting out and behaving like that, there's always an underlying issue. It's
Yes.
never just, oh, this child is bad. We need to expel this child. Oh, this child is disrespectful. We need to kick them out of class. That's never it. That's just how they are showing
Yes.
that something is going on within their hearts and within their minds.
100%. I agree with you 100% on that.
So it was kudos to the parents for saying, let me bring my child to, a therapist. Let me bring them to Elena so I can get my child some help, because it has to be more than just the child is spitting and acting out. It has to be more than that. And, I will say this, and then I'll go to my next question, Elena, that as a therapist, and I could be wrong on this, but I feel like as a therapist or as someone in the medical field, you have a chance to spend more time with your patients than you do in the medical field, because it's like, okay, you have this headache, take this medicine, you get better, you do a follow-up, and then that's it. But when you're with a therapist such as yourself, you really are able to sit and listen and learn and get to know your patient.
Absolutely. It's a very different level of care. And, being in the medical field, I mean, I worked in the medical field for a short period of time, and I went to medical school for a little bit, and shadowing doctors and things like that, I noticed how quickly they are to prescribe medications for the symptoms of psychological concerns as well. So Adderall was a big fix, a huge fix, and it was never like why. It was more of like, well, I'm noticing there is hyperactivity in school, so I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with the school, so can we put them on the medication? And how quickly a doctor would put the child on the medication is unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some misconceptions that people have about therapy?
Well, there's still such a stigma about it. I
I agree.
personally think that everybody could really get something out of it. Even therapists should go to therapy. Before I became a therapist, that was one of the things that they really encouraged us to do, is to go through our own process and our own griefs and our own traumas and things like that in order to be fully present for the individual that is in front of us. But there are a lot of misconceptions about, well, there must be something really wrong with you in order for you to go to therapy, and you must be really an unbalanced human being. And in fact, you might just need somebody that's a third party, non-judgmental third party that needs to hear you out, because a lot of our concerns are temporary. And you don't have to be in therapy for years on end or forever. It could be something just that you are going on through temporarily, and that you need to, have a listening ear. So, and, I've met a lot of people in my field that also don't give the field the best of names. Unfortunately, it's hard to find a good provider that you match with. So, a lot of times people try and they quit very quickly. Like it wasn't a good experience for them, so they don't move forward with their care.
What are some things that people should look for, or maybe questions they should ask a potential therapist? You were talking about a lot of times the patient doesn't mesh well with the therapist. What are some things that people should look for when they're looking for a therapist? What are some questions that people should ask a potential therapist?
Sure. So I think it's important to know what the specialties are of the therapist. And if the specialties don't align with what you are, seeking out in therapy, also seeing if the therapist is open to learning more about those concerns that you're coming in with in order to be present. Somebody who's a really good listener, also learning what techniques they're specialized in. And if that's something that you're willing to go through, because if it's not a technique that you're comfortable with, paying for or sitting through, then it's really not worth the time.
Oh, yes, yes. So you primarily deal with depression and loneliness. How does that present itself? I mean, I feel like I know how it presents itself because we see it on TV, which is not always 100% accurate. But how does that present itself? How can you diagnose, if that's the correct word, that someone is depressed or someone is lonely?
Well, loneliness, I think, is a catalyst for depression in a lot of ways. But depression, you will see a lot of changes. You could see weight changes. You could see um, changes in sleep patterns, um, sex drive changes. And there's also medical concerns that could also arise as well. So a lot of people will complain of aches and pains sometimes. So, those are things that you could see. And also just, while you're building the patient therapist relationship, learning more about how that person used to be and from what they are now. A big sign is anhedonia. And anhedonia is when you lose interest in things that you used to be interested in doing. And anhedonia is a huge sign that you are suffering from depression. And there is such a thing as functional depression as well, where they continue to go to work, they continue, hang out with the same people sometimes and things like that. But you have to be very qualified in your field to kind of notice that person is still going through a depressive state and need the techniques and need the listening ear in order to get through the symptoms that they're going through.
Something that I just discovered maybe about going on 5 years ago was the weight portion when you are depressed. I never knew that, like, your metabolism and everything is affected by when you become depressed. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Yes. So there is some correlation with cortisol levels. So cortisol levels could go up when you are stressed and you are depressed. And your metabolism can slow down also when you are in a depressive state. So there are some physical ailments that could come up when you are depressed. And also it could go the other pendulum can swing the other way, where you don't want to eat. You don't have an appetite to eat. You don't want to take care of yourself. And that's another sign of depression as well, where, a person who used to take care of themselves, they're now showering once a week and they're coming into you disheveled. They're coming into you really not caring what their outward appearance is, when in the past they did.
They did. How can you help someone that you know, Elena, this person needs therapy, but they don't want the help?
Of course. So I see that a lot in my groups that I run. So they'll like test the waters by going into a group and then they'll back off. And a lot of times what I would do is I would reach out to them individually outside of group and just show them that there is a caring ear that would be interested in listening to them. And that I do pro bono on the side. And, education is a big aspect of it too, educating about them, about, what would be the next steps. And maybe if it's overwhelming for them because they are depressed, sometimes things become really overwhelming to you when you're in a depressive state and you don't want to go through the steps. And it's like, okay, let's break it down into something smaller and something more manageable that you can slowly get to the part where, you could start working on yourself. And I'm not a huge proponent of psychopharmacology and push medications onto people, but sometimes it is helpful to get onto a medication that works and build a relationship with a psychiatrist so that you could start working on different techniques in therapy. And it actually becomes, you could function in therapy, because sometimes you are so deep into your depression that the chemical imbalance is so strong that you could use any technique, you could have any type of bond with that therapist, and you're not making any efforts, or it's really not pushing through.
Oh, wow. The clients that like they'll come in and test the waters and then get off, and then you call them later, are they always surprised that you actually took that
Absolutely.
extra step? Because I know I would be.
Absolutely. And a lot of times they are very responsive to it. Like, wow, you actually took the time
Yes.
to reach out, and
Yes.
you noticed that I left the group early, or you noticed that I
Yes.
wasn't really talking, or you noticed that, I'll have people sign up and actually not show up, and I will check in and be like, are you all right? I noticed that you were meant to come into group, and
Yes.
we missed you today. So, I just wanted to check in and make sure that you were all right. And you would be amazed how the floodgates kind of open up, and they're like, okay, well, this happened to me today and I really wasn't ready for group. And I'm like, that's the perfect time to actually come to group when these things happen
Mm.
to you. So giving them that educational aspect as well.
Wow. I mean, because for me, I would be super surprised, Elena, because most of the time people don't notice, number one. And if they do, they don't care enough to take the extra step and say, okay, well, they came and then they quickly got off, or they came, they didn't say anything. So I would just be amazed that a therapist, cared about me or cared about my situation enough to take that extra step. Kudos to
Thank
you
you.
for that.
Thank you. I mean, you'd be amazed how many conversations I have outside of groups, actually, where people would still email me back and forth, where they're like, I didn't feel comfortable talking about this in group, but I wanted to disclose this, or, I didn't get a chance to really talk about this because I didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable because it's such a sensitive topic, but I wanted to, make this known that this is where I am currently. So, yeah, I do have a, at least a handful of people that email me on a regular basis outside of group to let me know what is really going on with their lives.
Yes. What do you wish more people knew about depression and loneliness?
Well, I feel like loneliness could really, I mean, isolation is a really fast catalyst to bring you into a depressive state. So it is so important to have a good support network. That's one of the first questions I ask people, is what your support network looks like and what they're willing to do to build up their support network, because it changes so much, especially as adults. I work primarily with adults right now,
Mhm.
and it's hard to make friends and make good bonds with individuals when you're an adult. People move on, you lose your friendships, people move, people relocate, people, start families, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, I lost this friend, or I don't feel
Yes.
comfortable reaching out to them because they just had a baby. And what I always encourage them is, be the initiator, make that a goal for yourself, where you reach out to at least one person a day and you feed your social meter, because we are all social beings. And when you
Mhm.
don't, even if you don't feel comfortable or you don't feel up to it, push yourself through it, and you'd be amazed how well it makes you feel. And if that person is not responsive, then that just shows to you that you need a different type of person in your supportive network. And there's different websites that I usually bring people to. They should start paying me for this, because usually I bring up different apps that they could start working on,
Yes.
different, like meetup.com and things like that, or Eventbrite, where there's different, you could match with people that have similar interests with you. And when
Wow.
we work on together for you to start building up those guts to actually, participate in things like that. And sometimes, even socializing in groups and making that part of your routine, and having a routine is so important. But loneliness and isolation could drive you to a very deep depression. And I've gotten individuals where I had to screen them for suicidal ideation because it gotten so bad, because they isolate so much due to whatever they're going through in life.
I know earlier you stated, Elena, that you dealt with, of course, children, adults, and also senior citizens. When you're dealing with senior citizens, is it the loneliness because, the kids have gone on, and depending on kind of your age, a lot of your friends are maybe passing away, and it
Yes.
just kind of leads to inadvertent loneliness because no one's there anymore except for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's part of that is grieving the losses that you've had, which is not linear in any way, no matter what
True.
the books say.
That's true.
You could have a good day and then the next day you are in full grief mode.
True.
So helping them process those losses, but at the same time, giving them the courage to build new relationships, building a new routine. There's so many different programs that are out there for the geriatric population, and finding the right program and encouraging them to do so is so important.
Absolutely. So, how is depression different from just I'm sad? I'm sad today, I'm sad tomorrow.
Well, sadness is a symptom of depression.
Oh, really?
So they're very much interconnected. Yes.
Okay.
So you could feel sadness when you are depressed. And then there is the sadness where it's a temporary experience
Mm-hmm.
where, like, oh, I had a really bad experience in work and I'm really sad over it. And that's something that could be a temporary therapeutic, relationship where we kind of get over that, build techniques of how to get over that if that happens again, God forbid. Um, and, you know, that could be a temporary thing, but sadness is a symptom of depression, and it's more persistent in depression.
Do you feel like this is just me thinking out loud? Do you feel like the word depression is overused? I feel like it's used so much that it negates like actually what depression is and the people that are actually suffering with depression.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for people to be like, oh, I'm depressed, rather than I'm going through a sad
Yes.
episode. um, but there's so many different levels of depression too. Like I said, I deal people with suicidal ideation, which is kind of the extreme of depression.
Mhm.
And then there's people who, have depression and they kind of take it out on being either hyperactive or being, like oppositional, or being angry, or there's a lot of correlation between anger and depression.
Mhm.
So, a lot of times people don't even know that they are going through a depressive episode because they are functional in a way. But I do agree with you that a lot of people are quick to say, oh, I'm depressed. And, that's kind of like my cop out for why I'm behaving in a certain manner.
Exactly.
So, that's why it's so important to build that relationship with your therapist and start working on techniques of balancing your mood. And because right now we're seeing such an increase, especially after COVID, such an increase in mood disorders, and depression is one of them.
Are you still seeing a high number of that? I mean, I know we're not completely out of COVID. I don't know if we ever will be completely out of COVID, but it's been several years now since the first onset of COVID.
Yes.
So, are you still seeing numbers rising in your therapist because of depression because of COVID?
Absolutely, because people still work remotely. They don't have that interaction, you know, with their coworkers the way that they used to. Kids have play dates virtually. You see that all the time. People don't feel comfortable bringing people into their homes a lot of times. Um, you don't see the same bonds being made as prior to, what we experienced with COVID. Um, but I think with the technological world in itself, you see a lot of the things of, like, I have adult patients who are like, yeah, I hung out with my friends. I played games virtually today with them. I'm like, what kind of bond did you create with them today? I mean,
Right.
I'm glad that you interacted with another person, but it's different when you are rather going out on a dinner date with them and talking to them face to face or on the phone rather than playing a video game. And that further causes isolation. And that's why I say it's so important to feed that social meter so that you don't fall deeper into that rabbit hole.
Elena, what are some tangible things that people can do daily to help with their depression, or maybe even help ease the burden, if I can use that word, of depression?
Sure. So having a routine is really important. Again, feeding that social media is very important. There's a lot of apps that recently came out that help you build healthy habits and healthy routines. Really prioritizing yourself and, taking healthy eating, making sure healthy eating is part of your routine. Some form of exercise, connection with nature is important. There's a lot of grounding exercises that you could do, gratitude work, things like that. Where in gratitude work, I don't mean like, oh, I'm so happy I have a roof over my head. I'm so happy I have food that I ate today. It's even the smallest things that you could come up with. Like, oh, I'm so happy that, I traveled from A to B for the first time and I wasn't anxious doing so and I made it there safely.
Yes.
And it's the littlest things that you could there's apps for that where you could even look back when you're having a downtime.
Oh.
And you could look at like, wow, I really accomplished this. And like, wow, I really took time to write about these little things that are of importance that I found to be of importance to me that day.
Oh.
So there's so much that you could do that, could ease those depressive symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have that non-judgmental third party to kind of help you, to encourage you and to hold you accountable,
Mm-hmm.
that's also very helpful to do.
Absolutely. Okay, so what about loneliness? What are some daily things that people can do to help with loneliness?
I mean, even myself, I have in my app for my daily habits is to reach out to at least one friend and to be the initiator if I have to be, because I know that I know everybody's busy doing their own thing. So, but for me, I know that it's important to at least connect to one person a day.
Okay.
And if they're not responsive that day, at first I would ask in my therapy mind, are you okay? Why are you not responding? Is everything all right?
Yes.
But if that person is not very responsive, then I would, move on to something else. But feeding, in regards to loneliness, again, there's a lot of different ways to connect, even as an adult, with other people that are like-minded as you. If you don't feel comfortable doing it in person right away, there is a lot of Zoom, like interactive Zoom meetings that you could go into. And it's a hit or miss. You have to try different things and not give up. If you really want to build that network that is supportive to you, that is important to do, is to put that energy into going into those groups, looking into different meetups, reconnecting with old friends, nourishing the relationships that you currently have, because you don't want to isolate. Isolation could bring you quickly into a depressive state.
Elena, I read, this was a while ago, but correct me if I'm wrong on this. The number stated that the majority of adults that are over 40 years old do not make new friends. And I just found that very startling, that at over the age of 40, you don't make new friends. Why is that?
It is hard to make those connections, because after 40, you find that, your own friends have moved on. They started their families. They have different focuses in their life, or they are focused more on their career than on, maintaining and nourishing those friendships. But, if you are a person of a healthy mindset, you know the importance of having that community and having that friendships. So I would say, and I would highly encourage people to kind of get out there and rebuild those friendships, get the guts to do so. And if you don't, work with a therapist to build those techniques of how to build those friendships. I had a person that I met in one of my groups who knew the importance of making friendships, but she's like, I'm so awkward. I can't, like, I just, I can't start a conversation with a random person. Like, I don't know how to do this. And we found different ways of her for her to build those friendships. She went back to school. So I'm like, okay, when you're in groups, start initiating these different type of conversations.
Right.
Learn more about the person. Be a good listener. Don't make it all about yourself. And if you notice that that person isn't reciprocating, then they're not for you. You want to make sure that person is also asking you questions about how you're doing as well, and what's going on in your life. And it's a trial and error process, but learning techniques of making new friendships. There's multiple books out there of building new communities for yourself. That there's a writer called Jenny Allen. She's more on the conservative side and she's more on the religious side, but she has really good pointers on how to build a community. So if you focus more on that aspect, if you're not religious, then it's a really good read. And it also, really goes back to what I'm trying to emphasize, which is how important it is to have those friendships and how important it is to build those communities. But yeah, it is not easy when you're in your 40s and you have your own life and you have 1,000 things on your to-do list. And but it's important to understand that if you don't want to isolate and you don't want your partner to be your only friend, it's important to, or your child to be your only friend. It's important to put the effort into it and to build new techniques of getting out there and seeing what works.
I think one of the scarier things, Elena, is, for people over 40 is like, what if they don't like me? What if they don't respond? What if they don't ask me questions? What if they don't, interact with me? That's hard.
Yeah, totally. And I think the good thing to understand is it's important to not internalize that and be like, oh, it's me. It's just that person is not meant to be part of your community. Right. If they're not reciprocating in any way. But it's important to not internalize. Everybody has different personalities. And if they are not meshing with you, it's not on you. Yeah. It's just they're not meant to be part of your community.
Absolutely. Okay, so throughout this podcast, Elena, you've been talking about like groups that you work with and people that you work with in those groups. Kind of tell us a little bit, if you are at liberty to, about the groups that you host. When do you host them? What is that name of the group?
Sure. So I work right now with Pay What You Can peer support groups, and they are pro bono. It's donation based, but it's a pro bono kind of situation, and which is a rarity, which a lot of times people that do come into group, they're like, wow, this is free. This is amazing. This is a great support network. And right now I run it's called Depression, Loneliness, and Boredom group. And I also run an eating disorders group, which is one of I did my dissertation on. So I have a specialty in eating disorders as well. So I run those two groups right now. And I used to run a grief group as well. So a lot of experience in groups.
Absolutely. And so people can just go to that website and just sign up for like whatever group they feel like they're needing at that time.
Absolutely. So again, it's called Pay What You Can peer support group.com. And there's such a variety of different groups. I mean, some of them are really random and very interesting, but there are some that are more mainstream. There's ones that focus more on building different techniques, like writing techniques, and there's some that are adulting after college. There's a lot on grief. There's a lot on autism. There's a lot on OCD. I mean, the variety runs the gamut in this group. And one of the good things too is that our founder is very open to new groups. Right. So if you don't find in in the list of all the different groups that we offer, something that you're looking for, you could always reach out to either a therapist or our founder, who is very, he's easy to connect with. And you could actually ask to see if this is a possibility to run a different type of group, if there's a need for that. And so he's very open to that. He's a very approachable individual. So
yes, and I've had Daniel on the podcast,
he
and
is
I
amazing.
agree with you 100%. He is amazing.
Yes,
Yeah,
he went into the field for all the right
he
reasons,
did.
and that's hard to find. So
It
he has everybody's best interest at
is
heart,
true.
and the people that the moderators that he brought on board are also just very educated and really using up their own time to do this.
Hmm.
So,
Exactly.
and
And
that is
you
very
are one of those.
yes, thank you.
You are one of those. So we all thank you. We all thank you,
Thank
and we
you.
all thank Daniel. Um, so just a few more questions for you, Elena. How can family and friends help or support a loved one that's dealing with depression and loneliness?
I think reaching out is very important. Letting them know that they're there when you need it, knowing that they're part of your support network, that they're not alone, is very important. It's going back to my whole situation where I always ask, what does your support network look like? And I
Yes.
want people to feel that their family is part of their support network. And by letting them know that they are, by reaching out, that's very important. And depending on where they are in their depressive episode and in their depressive journey and then their treatment journey, it may mean, being there physically, may mean they're doing phone calls occasionally, texts on occasion, or bringing meals if needed. It just depends on where they are in their journey, but letting them know that you're there and that you're not giving up on them.
Excellent. And what about the community? What do you feel like the community as a whole can do to support and help people? Of course, we're talking about depression and loneliness on this podcast, but just in mental health as a whole, how can the community help with people that are dealing with mental health?
Of course. I wish there was more programs out there like Pay What You Can Peer Support Group, where, there's more diversity in what is being offered in care-wise and technique-wise, because all the moderators that Daniel brought on board have all different techniques. So I think it's important to have educated providers who are also open to learning more about the different techniques that are out there. I think community-wise, so we have to go through, special credits every year that we have to accumulate to continue on with our licensures and things like that. So offering more education to the providers, and that is more diverse in regards to what is going on currently in our environment. And just more education for the providers and more education for people that need the help, and more guidance. More care management, where there's people who can help you, guide you through the process of finding the right help and finding the right support network in the sense of medical and psychiatric as well. Because those are important as well. Knowing that you were covered medically and psychiatrically is really important. It's not just support network of like friends, but
Right.
I have a great therapist that I could really rely on, or I could actually talk to my psychiatrist more than for 5 minutes. That's important.
Absolutely, absolutely. What about the people, Elena, that are listening right now to you, that are watching right now, that are dealing with depression or dealing with loneliness? Maybe they know it, maybe they don't know it. What advice, what help can you give them now?
I would think the most important thing is to see what options you really have out there,
Mhm.
reaching out to your insurance and seeing if there's referrals for therapists. That can't hurt you. Well, depends on who you get. But it doesn't hurt to speak to a therapist and see what the evaluation shows. Maybe you just need some sort of temporary techniques that you need to learn, or listening to different podcasts that teach you different techniques about certain symptoms that you might be experiencing right now. Talking to your medical provider about the symptoms that you're experiencing, because they might refer you to a therapist that they might know, or a community program that they might know. So, just being more open to looking into the care that is available for you.
Mhm. Elena, you have been a therapist for several years now. What is your intention in this space?
I think it's so important to help people find their purpose in life and to really enjoy life that is so short and goes by so quickly.
Yes.
And to really help them become educated in what they're experiencing, and become educated in how they could get rid of some of those symptoms and really enjoy the life to their fullest, and really understand what their potential in life is. I think that is my main intention.
Absolutely. As a therapist, who do you go to? Who helps you? Because you are speaking to people that are depressed, that are lonely, that, maybe has an eating disorder. That's a lot for any human being to take on, let alone the numbers that of patients that you see. Who do you go to? Who is your support system to help you when maybe it gets to be too much?
Well, I made sure to build a community of friends. I made sure to have a routine myself.
Okay.
And girl, I have a therapist too.
Yeah.
Because I would never want countertransference to happen. I would never want trauma bonding to happen. I literally feel like there's two parts of me where I would literally have to shut off my own trauma experiences
Mhm.
and be there present fully for the person that is in front of me, or the people in a group that are
Right.
there in front of me. And, to me, it's important to kind of know what works for me, to kind of stabilize and stay grounded so that I could be present for everybody else
Right.
and not
Okay.
transfer that over onto them.
Yes.
I've
Yes.
seen happen, and I think that is so immobilizing, and that does not help at all.
Oh, it doesn't help either person, the therapist or the client.
No, no.
No. Okay. So my final question for you, Miss Elena, who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast? But you have to help me get them on.
Absolutely. And I actually spoke to this person, and they're very excited to be part of the
Yay!
podcast. So, Miss Allison Butler Spina, she is an elementary school teacher who loves working full time. She lives her life to the fullest. She travels and she works full time, and she does all of this with a stage 4 terminal cancer diagnosis.
Wow.
So while raising her family and running to all these games that she has to do, and also being there present for her students, she loves her students so
Oh,
much. So, she is very much about her career, and at the same time balancing her terminal illness aspect as well.
absolutely. She
And
sounds was it the Army? I don't know which one that used to say we do more before you wake up than you do all day. I
okay.
forgot I forgot what branch of the military used to say that. But she sounds like that person.
Oh yes, she's vivacious, she's full of energy, and she loves her life to the fullest, and she'll be the first one to say it. And we actually worked together to start a Long Island group for individuals who have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And she runs that group with, with so much. She's an exceptional person. She really is.
That is so good. Well, Elena, this was the second podcast that we've done in as many weeks. And again, you did not disappoint.
Oh, thank you so much. Neither have you.
Thank
Neither have you.
you so Thank you so much. Thank you for being on my podcast. and just being emotionally open and available. And I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too. And thank you for having me and making the time for me. I appreciate it so
Absolutely.
much.
Absolutely. And to my audience, to my listeners, you can get Elena's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.